Good morning, everyone. This is the Public Affairs Roundtable. It's brought to you every month by Williamson, Inc., our Chamber of Commerce here in Williamson County. And we're happy to have you with us this morning. Looking forward to a lively discussion about the sales tax and schools and things like that this morning. Our guest with us this morning, Mr. Rogers Anderson, the Mayor of Williamson County, and Dr. Mike Looney, the Superintendent of our Williamson County Schools. Rogers, how'd the fair do? Let's talk about important stuff first.
Well, thanks very much for having both of us on and to discuss some of the issues, and to the Channel 3 folks for getting up early, and Vanderbilt, we thank you for that. So the fair just ended actually about a week ago, and a little more than a week ago now, and we're still getting our feet up on it. It was a very successful fair. We thank the many people that came and brought their children, and if there was any discussion at all or any thought about our county not growing and having to build school buildings, all you had to do was attend the fair. You could see the strollers and the children, and it was a pretty convincing sale, just watching the many people out there have a good time.
A good event, and it's been a lot of fun for about, what, 15 years now, 14?
This was the 13th year, and every year they just continue to get better. And of course, when you're discussing outdoor activities, the weather is always the controlling factor, and it was a beautiful week.
Absolutely. You gave a speech a couple of weeks ago at the chamber meeting, your State of the County address, and the kind of the signature piece of it was a announcement or a little explanation that you are visiting all the cities around the county, proposing to raise our sales tax here in the county by a half of a cent. And but tell us a little bit about the growth that's kind of creating the need for that, and then we'll talk about the schools here in a minute. But you went to an announcement yesterday, I think, about another employer that's a possibility coming to Williamson County. Give us an update on all the growth that we're looking at.
So let's take the latter that we had yesterday. The governor and his economic development team announced out of Nashville yesterday there's an existing company that's in Davidson County and in Williamson County that is bringing approximately 800 new jobs, existing jobs, close downs of other places, but consolidating and bringing those 800 jobs to the Middle Tennessee area. A little unusual in the announcement up at Capitol Hill yesterday, in that they didn't really designate a site, they just designated a region, and I surmised out of that there were probably several other states in the running for that particular company. The company is an international company. I understand the governor and his staff visited Amsterdam within the last quarter, and was able to talk to the company by the name of Phillips. I remember as a young boy many years ago at East Tennessee, there was a Phillips Magnavox, and they made the electronics and the late televisions that we have, and of course that company has since gone by the wayside. I think that the Magnavox area up in the Greenville area and the Morristown area was the last manufacturing era for the electronics.
Right.
The Phillips that we are identified with today, it's a worldwide company, I think of about 170,000 employees throughout the world with employees, is tuned more into healthcare. It's akin to many of the healthcare companies and the facilities that we have here, and certainly in Middle Tennessee. And that was a strong card for them to consider working with our not-for-profit and for-profit hospitals that we have throughout the Middle Tennessee area and the state of Tennessee. So I give hats off to Matt and Elizabeth and their team, and working with the Nashville team. And as so goes with so many of these corporate companies that come into our area and look at our communities, there's so many factors, Dave, that they're weighing, but one of those certainly is the workforce issue, and the other one is your strong community or sense of community, and the competition that brings either from Davidson County or Williamson County. And it was actually expressed in one of the meetings we had several weeks ago that about our schools, about the high outcomes that they have. And I think you have to weigh all of those things that are coming. Some of them, if they choose to go into Davidson County or they choose to go to Williamson County, all of us will benefit from more jobs for our community. Certainly it brings more traffic, and that's the, I guess the Achilles heel, but it's the way I have to look at it, and I think other mayors look at it and city managers look at it, is there are still good jobs. We're a very pro-business state now, and particularly in Williamson County, and offering and encouraging those companies to look at our area. We're not going to get them all, but Dr. Looney is going to get a lot of those children as those families move to our community, whether they live, whether they choose Davidson County or where they choose Williamson County, and we encourage them to come to our community. And there'll be more said about that over the next few months. I have no time frame about when they'll make the announcement of what area, but when you bring 800 jobs, they're looking for office space, and that's kind of short. There's not as much here in Williamson County as in some other areas, but a lot of things can happen.
Tell us, what's the population of Williamson County right now?
It's approximately 220,000 people that we have, and our growth cycle, I think, heard you say, or someone say the other day, about 100 people are moving into Williamson County, in the Middle Tennessee area every day. And I'm sure we get our fair share because of our excellent schools, but I also think we get our fair share about just quality of life that we offer here in Williamson County. Good jobs, good community. Our streets are blessed with a lot of people walking up and down, shopping, enjoying the music, and likewise in Davidson County too. So it's major competition between us all. You
don't see our growth slowing down anytime soon?
Well, I hope not. This gray hair that I have on my hair would indicate to you that I've been around a few years, and that's true.
At least you still got some.
I was not going to look at you when I made that comment. And I think all of us that have lived a good life, we've lived a few years, understand that the ebb and flow of businesses and cycles. Today, the children and under Dr. Looney's environment understand more about global involvement than I had ever heard of when I was a boy.
Right.
It was all about what happened in Bluegrass, Tennessee.
Right.
And there wasn't a lot of boys and girls thinking about global international companies. And today that can change with a major disaster. I heard on the news this morning as I was getting ready, talking about the oil refineries are shutting down down in the Gulf Coast because of the major event that's coming through. Yeah, I was trying to think of his name. And, it would have been in the after newspaper before you'd heard that later in my life, and you didn't think about things like that. But today things happen instantly in European countries, and that affects how we do business here. We are fortunate in Middle Tennessee, and particularly here, in that we have a very diverse economy. Healthcare is a very strong part of that, but so is the automobile industry. Right. And so are so many other things that we do in our community, and that's a blessing.
Right.
But I'm sure, like all things, we will see some activity began to pick up in one area and drop off in an area. But we've gone through it once about 5, 6, 7 years ago. We're very diverse. The community is very strong, and we have a sense of joining arms and weathering the storm and taking care of Williamson County.
Right.
And I'm so blessed for that for this community we have.
It's certainly been a good place for me and my family, and we constantly continue to hear about the schools and how attractive they are to the folks that come to Williamson County. Dr. Looney, tell us a little bit about the growth of the schools over the past few years and what y'all are seeing headed our way.
I think I'd like to add to what the mayor said, and that is, if you think about a community and including a school system as a living, breathing kind of organism, there's not a place in the life cycle where it's static. Mm-hmm. The community is either growing and prospering, or it's diminishing and dying. Yep. And so I think growth, despite the many challenges that it has, I think it's symbolic of it's living, breathing, and prospering. And the school system is the same way, because we're just simply a microcosm of the broader community. Our school system is growing. We're growing by, thousands of kids literally every year. We expect in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years to grow by about 10,000 students, in the next 10 years to grow by about 20,000 students. And so when you think about, one, how do we serve that many students with the resources that we currently have and project to have, and how do we maintain the same quality that we currently offer our community, is a tremendous challenge. Last year alone, and I'm just blown away by this number, just the graduating class last year earned $170 million in college scholarships. I mean, that's unheard of anywhere in America. Wow. $170 million, and that money is returned to the family that can then spend it locally, or reinvest in their business, or buy a car, or upgrade their house, or fix the roof. And so we recognize that the school system in some way does impact the local economy and jobs. Mm-hmm. So,
no question about it. The budget that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, in your address, I think county budget for this year, we're looking at about $550 million. $350 million of that is for schools. And I guess my question is, the $350 that's coming to the schools, is that just for operations? Does that pay for new schools? Does that pay for the construction of new schools and upgrades of the old schools? How does that work?
So, Dave, thank you for the question. One of the hardest things to explain to anyone is the way the mechanics of schools and government work. We're so blessed to have 4 representatives. I see at least one of them here this morning, and Sam, that understand that when they go to Nashville, Tennessee, their main job up there is to make this a better state, with a strong emphasis on Williamson County, because they were elected by those people here.
Right.
And the things that happen in Nashville oftentimes are shifted down to Dr. Looney and myself. And when that budget is put together, that's looking at all the departments that we have interest in within Williamson County. Now, 2/3 to 3/4 of that budget is focused on schools. And the number that you mentioned there is for the operational side of the schools, the operational of everything from which I've heard Dr. Looney and his budget director talk about that about 85% of their total budget is in the area of payroll and salaries and benefits and the things that we offer to attract those great teachers that we have. The rest of it goes for the other things that they need within the schools.
Right.
But unlike you and I in a personal household or in the private world that I came out of, and most of the people in the audience have, when we go to purchase a house, that's part of our that's part of the value that we have to determine how to make the note on that payment of the house, unless you're fortunate enough to pay cash for your house. And there's not a lot of that occurring in Williamson County, just paying cash for.
Right.
So in the system that we have and the way that the laws are written up, the schools and the school board go to Dr. Looney, and they put together a program, and they say, we need schools at XYZ spot location. They either approve it or disapprove it, send it over to our 24-member county commission body. And of course, we're going to wrangle, we're going to go back and forth, we're going to cut some here and there. But at the end of the day, the function of the county commission is to either fund schools or not tell him how to do the schools,
Yeah.
and not what classes to have, but to either fund it or not, and they could give suggestions of where they may cut. But in his proposal this year, Dr. Looney presented a budget about $19 million. We took $5 million out. They were very good to work with us on that, but they still got $14–15 million more than they had the year before.
Now, that's above and beyond the 350?
No, that is part of the
Part of the 350.
So you'd have to go back last year and say that it was 350 minus $14 million. That's a good way to look at it.
Okay, for operations.
Now, the press, as good as they are, and we're all friends with them, but sometimes they sell the story that the school budget was cut. It was cut on a proposed recommendation. It wasn't cut on the actual amount that they had from one year to the next. I get that. And I've been around 31 years, that hadn't changed much. So it's very difficult to explain that to the general public because they get excited to see that this county commission cut $14–15 million. Dr. Looney truly needs that money. Mm-hmm. And so he has to go back to the well, figure it out, and then go back to the school board, they ratify it, send it back. That's the process. But the debt of the schools, once they approve it at the county commission level, then Dr. Looney has to go off and do the bidding, purchase the land, all the things go with that. He's telling us he's going to get them open in a year or two. But the county commission's responsible for paying the debt of the schools. And so that piece of the ledger, that piece of the accounting puzzle, goes over onto the debt side of the county commission, which is not a responsibility of Dr. Looney.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand what's operation budget, what's capital improvements in new schools.
There's a man that can tell you that.
And the county finance apparatus is about as complicated as anything I've ever seen. I'm trying to understand it, but I don't think I quite have my arms around it. But the operation budget is about how much, Dr. Looney?
Almost $350 million.
Okay.
So very simplistically, the operation budget covers everything except for the mortgage payment.
Okay, okay. And so in the past, when we built these new schools or made the major additions to our existing schools, how was that funded? Whoops.
Well, so the mortgage payment, as I'll call it, for the schools that we build, that payment comes from the county's budget rather than the school system's budget. All of the operations, everything, the electric bills, hiring of the teachers, having the janitors clean, serving the students lunch, getting them to and from school, all that's part of the operation budget. So once again, the two pots of money is, one is the operations, everything that it takes to run schools.
Right.
And the second is the mortgage payment on the schools that we do build. And the way that our government works is the mortgage payment actually doesn't come from the school's budget, it comes directly from the county's budget.
The county budget. Okay.
How about if we simplify it like that? How many boys you got?
3 last time.
Go buy them a house, you pay the note, let them live in it.
So your dad and Mike's one of the kids, right?
That's it's about as simple as I can make it.
Gotcha. If anybody's got a napkin out there, we got a little coffee spilled on the
Shook him up,
counter
but
up
so
here.
bad when he knew he was going to have to buy a house for his kids.
That's we're actually going to close on one next week, but he saved up the down payment himself. So and that's what I was trying to kind of flesh out is how we paid for these in the past. Now, Dr. Looney, we're looking at, you say 2,000 new students a year. Thank you, Diane.
Great.
Got to have somebody to take care of me. At least it was a sippy cup. It wasn't a wide open cup. But you have talked about the 2,000 kids a year. and how many new high schools we're going to have over the next 10 years, et cetera. Help us all understand.
So depending on how we configure any new schools that we build, we currently are, the Nolensville model is the model that we like the most because we think it saves the most taxpayers' money, where we buy a large parcel of land, we place an elementary, middle, and high school on the same piece of property.
Right.
But depending on how, we need 17 new buildings. We may be able to do that on 12 campuses, depending on how we configure the schools. Okay. And so most of the buildings that we project that we're going to need is on the front side of the 10-year span. We think that most of the buildings actually are going to be needed within the first 6 years of the next 10-year span, just because of the way that the students are rolling in and the current capacities at those schools. So somewhere between 12 and 17 parcels of property. Certainly we're going to need 17 new buildings to house students with classrooms in it.
How much are those going to cost?
Well, if we use today's dollars, a little bit over $500 million. But the problem is, as we've just learned recently, the price point keeps going up. And so I can't project what the price point is going to be 5 or 6 years from now. If we use the value of today's dollars, then we're just north of $500 million just to build the building.
Right.
Now the whole other, that's on the mayor's side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the operational aspect, which is honestly in many ways the more expensive part. Right. Which is hiring the teachers and supplying the materials, hiring the bus drivers, all those things. So on both sides, if you added both sides together, you're talking about $1 billion+. Right.
But the operations side, will that not be covered by the growth of the county, the new houses going on the tax rolls, the new office buildings going on the tax rolls?
I think that's one of the things that the mayor and the county commission have been working on. But the reality of it is, if you bring a new home in with 2.3 students in it, as an example, the taxes that are paid by those new homeowners in that new home don't pay for the amount of expenses that the county incurs specifically just for schools. Right. Not talking about police and fire and all the other things that happen, but if you just consider schools, the answer is no, it doesn't.
Right. The $500 million, is that just for new schools, or does that include the projects like we're talking about at Brentwood and at Page and at Franklin?
It does include, that's a great question. It does.
Tell us a little bit about those 3 projects, if you will.
Sure. So honestly, at the insistence of the county commission, the school board has gone back and looked at its current buildings to determine whether or not we can add on. Is there a way to not buy new property and just add on to existing facilities? In fact, the school board increased the allowable size of high schools and middle schools as a result of that work. And so we've gone from a max capacity of 1,800 when we build or add on to schools to 2,200 students. And so in some locations, we have determined that it does make financial sense to add on to buildings. Brentwood High School, Brentwood Middle School campus is an example of that. Page equally so. And so
taking the Brentwood campus for an example, I think that's a $17 million or thereabouts project, and that will increase the capacity of those schools there. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So once we add on the STEM building, which is going to be primarily classroom space, we will be able to serve 1,500 students at the middle school and 2,000 students at the high school. So 3,500 students.
Compared to what now?
Compared to, well, you would ask me that question. I think it's about 2,600 at this point in time.
Okay. So that's adding capacity then. I thought they were just adding turf to the football field and a few things like that, but
well, we did add turf, but that's because we have to demolish the practice field in order to build a parking lot to house a new student. So it's kind of one of those domino effects.
That's all right. And Page is a major project, renovation, expansion, $43 million, I believe.
When all is said and done, it's going to top that. We just as with the Brentwood High School campus, so we have a phased plan. The first phase is somewhere in the $10 million range, which would add 30 classrooms to the Page Middle School campus. 3-story building. We've never done that before. So once again, we're trying to find better ways to save taxpayer money.
Kids
and
need
use,
the exercise anyway.
Yes, sir. It's gonna. Well, we're gonna use a slide from the third story. We're just gonna slide down to the first. But seriously, we're trying to decrease the footprint of the building to save money.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And then at Franklin, I understand just this week you discussed another $9 million or so there. And what does that accomplish? What are you trying to do there?
So Franklin High School is the board had already acted on that, and the county commission approved $1.5 million of our initial request, and that was for renovating the Columbia State campus, or at least 50% of that campus. So the county commission asked us to come back at a later time. The board has now acted, and so we'll be going back to the county commission, and that does several things. It allows us to finish the work that we've started at the Columbia State campus. It also allows us to add artificial turf and to expand the track at Franklin High School. As you know, Franklin High School is one of only 2 schools in the county that can't hold a track and field meet because there's only 6 lanes there. And then there's been a lot of outcry about the condition and capacity and adequacy of athletic facilities at Franklin High School, and that would resolve that with a field house.
Right. Now, the 17 buildings that you mentioned over the next 10 years that we need, tell us a little bit about where they are, what they are. Another campus or 2 like the Nolensville campus, is that right, or what?
Well, Dave, if I told you
that,
the price point's going to go up tremendously, so I'm just going to say we need land everywhere. So if you're a realtor, we'd like to talk to you. No, we actually do have a plan that tells geographic regions. I will tell you there's a couple of things on the horizon. Obviously, the Page expansion and improvements. We also are going to need an elementary school in that general area. We're going to need a middle school. The city of Franklin has been nice enough to partner with the county on developing sewer to the Oakview area. We own 35+ acres there. We need a middle school in that general area, so we'll be coming forward with a middle school request. And then we need another elementary school in the immediate future in the Spring Hill area. So we do have pockets of tremendous growth, Nolensville, Spring Hill, Thompson Station. Fairview, surprisingly enough, is their growth rate is really high. It's about 6% right now. So, we still have capacity in Fairview, but the growth there is fast because there's availability of land there, I think, primarily. Right. The closer you get into the municipal areas, the congestion and the density is greater, so not that much new developments other than along the Carruthers Corridor. I drove down South Carruthers Corridor this past week and am absolutely stunned. I don't know if the audience has done that, but travel South Carruthers Corridor. I've never. It's like a whole city has emerged out of the ground there. Right. It's really scary, and the reality of it is, all of those homes are going to have kids in them, and I'm going to have to go to Daddy.
I can see the headlines of the paper now.
Okay, Dad. There's various mechanisms in the county financial system to raise money, and I've identified about 5. There's probably more, but you can, as I understand it, you could raise property taxes. You could use the adequate facilities tax, I think, to pay for some of this that we've had for many years. We just instituted a new education impact fee that we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. You could raise the wheel tax. You could use more from that source, or you could raise sales taxes to pay for all these $500 million worth of schools that we're going to need over the next 10 years. Is that the basis that you could look at to fund those?
For the most part, you hit the nail on the head with the hammer. You can do $50 here and there, but for the most part, you've identified the main points of paying for the requests the schools have listed. So let me kind of back up a little, Dave, and I'll try to talk about each one of them. During the last year in 16 and 17, many Saturdays, many nights, weekends were put together, identifying some of the issues that Dr. Looney and the school board presented, and those focused in and around the Brentwood area. And those schools that were identified at that time, and you've heard the solutions and the way the county commission stepped forward and funded those. But it would not have been possible to go through this year without a tax increase without the help of the city of Brentwood. And I think it's important to identify that. Their leadership, their board, their commissioners, through the efforts of Kurt, kind of steered and directed and put together a plan and took some funds out of that were in their program for capital programs for schools, and identified them and said, Dr. Looney and to myself, that we're going to cut a check for $2.4 million. Their board voted unanimous, and so I see Kurt's here this morning, and I thank him for directing that to help satisfy the problem for the Brentwood city.
Well, and then Franklin funded the sewer for the Oakview project.
And so what we're seeing in our community is exactly when the opening statement that you asked was about businesses. There's a camaraderie in this county like no other. That cities and counties, businesses, our state people that work with us, even at the national level, they help us to find solutions. It's just not on the back of 100% of the county, even though that's our responsibility under Tennessee Code Annotate. And the cities recognize that's where the growth is occurring. You just heard Dr. Looney say, go down South Carruthers and see a whole new city. That's right. And there are places like that in Brentwood, Fairview, Spring Hill, Nolensville, Thompson Station.
So there are 6 sources of funds, the cities being number 6 in this equation. If we could, let's talk about each one of them just a little bit. And
the cities?
No, the 6 sources that I've mentioned. Property taxes seems to be a non-starter in the county commission. That
property tax is $2.15 in the unincorporated area. We're one of the lowest property tax rates across the Middle Tennessee area. A lot of people would say you've got some room, you've got some flexibility in raising the property taxes. And you've got the list, and I've got the list. We're one of the lowest in the county, in the Middle Tennessee area, and a lot of that is a result of the business community with bringing jobs here and building those buildings and getting that value on the books. A penny in our county generates about $1.1 million, as opposed to some counties it barely gets over $25,000. So they'd have to have a tax increase just to buy a couple of vehicles. That's a strength in our cities. Right. When you go to the unincorporated, I've got to say that again, when you go to the unincorporated area, and we're going to get there, is that growth doesn't occur for the kind of development to pay the bills. So you've got to go back to your cities, and the cities acknowledge and recognize that. And so as we're traveling down that road, they're saying, yes, we can help for a limited time. Why? We're not asking for them to take money out of the existing pot of money they've got. If a sales tax is passed by the people, county commissioner does do it, the cities don't. They come back. But you go back to your property tax, that's how you protect your growth of your community and keep those taxes low.
Keep property taxes low. The county commission's pretty well made the statement, we're going to hold the line there.
Well, 2 years ago, we had a property tax increase right after a reappraisal, excuse me. We went from 231, 232 down to about 198, 180. I'm looking out for Paul, a little help here to help me with a nod. 185, and then we adjusted it to the 215 to pick up for some of that growth after a reappraisal period of time, and that's when a lot of counties adjust their rates. We had growth of 25%, 30% in some parts of our community, but we literally raised taxes 15%, and we got 13 votes out of 24. Yeah, I mean, property tax is not a very palatable thing that you want to pass on to your citizens, because even though schools are important, there's a lot of people that don't use schools anymore. Right, absolutely. But now, fortunately in our county, through the state legislators, they help. They could do more. And I've told Sam and Charles and Jack and Glenn, we've got to find a solution for this and I think Dr. Looney would admit it, for the basic education program that's up on the hill.
Right.
It is not fair to Williamson County, but there's no sympathy on the hill for Williamson County in all the things that we do, and there's growth. But
right.
the inequities of the plan, I've heard you expound on it. How much money do we get per kid from the state of Tennessee compared to some of the others?
Right at $3,300.
There's only one system lower than us, and that's Sevier County, I think,
Right,
Sam.
that's right.
And compared to what do some of the other counties around us get
Well, we have some neighboring counties that get 5,000 plus.
per kid?
Yes, sir.
That's not fair, but we'll fight that battle next January when we get the state legislators back in here and talk to them.
But to go on down the road, the property tax is $215. It's a sacred cow, and it should be a sacred cow. But I will have county commissioners to say raise the property tax as opposed to raising the sales tax. The wheel tax currently in our county, with the $5 adjustment that was put on for the Improvement Act on the standard passenger vehicle, is $54.50. I think that's right. Say around $55. To do the kind of payment schedule that the schools are requiring would require at least $125 per vehicle. Well, none of us just have one vehicle.
Right.
Most of us have 2 and 3 vehicles, and that's just not the way that's palatable for the average person in Williamson County. It requires county commission action, or you can do it on a referendum, either one of those.
Right.
But about 10 years ago, we tried it, and it was soundly defeated by 75% of the people, and all that money would have gone to schools, but they said they didn't want the wheel tax.
Right. Adequate facilities or adequate school facilities tax looks to me generates maybe $5 million a year.
So back 1988, the privilege tax, adequate school facility tax under the administration of Bob Ring and the county commission at that time passed a private act that allowed us to look at growth as it comes into our community and say, you need to help pay for a little of that growth. We were the only county that had it. We had the privilege tax. It's based on the square footage of the house. Mm-hmm. Currently, the privilege tax is $1 per square foot. Mm-hmm. Then the adequate school facility tax, which is another fee, was put on top of that, and so it's up to $2 now.
Right.
So you build a 3,000 square foot house times $2, you get $6,000. How much does it cost to? How much does it cost per kid for somebody to come into the system, counting the school buildings? All the growth is about
9.
About 9. So we're not there. Then we got to still build the buildings.
Right.
For all this growth that he's talking about, and he's right. So then we put in the educational impact fee last.
What do the new schools cost per seat, Mike?
Well,
Dr. Moody, I should say.
no, Mike is fine. I would tell you, the numbers that get floated around, I take issue with. So I would say this: we're spending about $200 per square foot of building when we build. I don't know that I can equate it to a per student, because the cost of an elementary seat is different than the cost of a high school seat. I think between $30,000 and $35,000 is probably fairly accurate, but
okay, that's a lot of money.
The study that we did indicated it was 25 to 27, if I remember correctly on that per student.
So, and we're raising 6 between the adequate facilities and the education facilities.
We kind of had a good handle on that, but then some folks in other parts of the county, the state, kind of put a cap on us, mm-hmm. and they said you could go no more 5-6 years ago, and said $2 is it. So then we came back with the educational impact fee last year. It was a new fee that we did public hearings. We went out into the community. We explained the mechanisms of it. The help pay for these capital costs is done in Florida. It's done in a few other areas. Dr. Looney was at a lot of these meetings to address the questions. The county commission approved it in November of last year and said, listen to the home builders. And the home builders were saying, well, they've already got some of these homes in the pipeline. Could you be mm-hmm. a little easier on us? And so we went in at 50 cents on the dollar beginning on March. We waited 4 or 5 months to get it started. We started it in March at
Okay,
50
so
cents.
you're now talking about the new
Educational impact fee.
That's a totally different fee than
They're
the
all
adequate
different.
facilities.
They're
So
all different.
Just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
everybody knew what we're
They're all
talking
different.
about.
And so we put that in place in March, based on square footage of a home, new home construction only.
Right.
And so the commission voted 50 cents on the dollar, with the full dollar to come online in September, just in a few days. And so just recently we've been hit with a lawsuit with Home Builders Association saying, and I should say that most of our local builders in our town have supported what we're attempting to do. And that new fee was to be passed on to that new person that moved into our community on that new home, rather than tax our existing residents.
Right.
Because we heard that over and over and over on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Don't raise mine for somebody else moving in. Let them pay their share. Now, it's expensive to move into this county.
Right.
I assure you of that. But now with the lawsuit, that's kind of put us on a, okay, we'll have to wait and see. We'll spend thousands of dollars defending. Hopefully we'll be successful. Our legal team thinks we will. That would help Dr. Looney. That would help out our existing issues that we are, but it's going to take time to go through the court system now.
Now that's projected to raise
about 22 to 25 million dollars a year on the last year's growth cycle.
As long as the growth continues.
That's correct.
On the current.
And we're keeping it off those property taxes, but now we're faced with a situation that says Dr. Looney still needs the schools. We're still seeing growth. Cities are helping.
Yep.
And we have got 4 options to speak of: sales tax, wheel tax, property tax, hotel motel tax.
Okay, if my math is right, we got 5 or 6 million off the adequate facilities tax. We got another 20 million off the education impact fee. We're getting somewhere between 25 and 30 million a year from those sources. And if we're going to spend 500 million over the next 10 years, that's about 50 million a year we need. It sounds like, just in rough round numbers. So the sales tax is the only other option we've got, it sounds like.
Well, the sales tax is an option for the citizens to tell us what to do.
Right.
We have traveled to all of the cities now, and all except Brentwood and Thompson Station have come on board. Brentwood will entertain it Monday night. I feel confident they'll come on board, and the same for Thompson Station. To say, let me explain the way this works.
Explain what you're asking them to do.
So the local sales tax, local option, is 2.25. The total tax with the state's portion is 7%. We're a sales tax driven state.
Right.
So they have 7, we have 2.25. We're asking the county commission to call for a referendum, probably in the month of October, to ask the voters to increase from 2.25 to 2.75.
Okay.
A 0.05 increase on the sales tax.
Okay.
All right. I'm not sure how that word
0.5 or 0.05?
0.5.
Okay.
So
Keep you honest here.
all right. So we're asking the voters to increase that 0.5.
Mm-hmm.
The way that money, if the voters tell us we'd rather do this, or rather do, it's not on the ballot that says do you want sales tax or property tax. It says do you want sales tax.
Right.
If the voters vote for it, we go forward with that option.
Right.
If not, then we got to go back to the county commission, put it in their lap, and let the 24 decide how they want to fund it, or tell Dr. Looney no.
Right.
And that's not going to sit good with him.
How much money will another half cent on the sales tax generate for us?
Approximately, and I'm going to round off here, $20 million based on last year's sales tax. But the last year's sales tax are eroding a little bit each year because of the way we have buying power and the way we purchase things today. That is hardcore dollar numbers at our bricks and mortar stores. When so many of us now, and I'm just as guilty, that I want to buy a tie or a shirt or whatever I want, go online, push a button, put my credit card in there, and away it comes. So that affects us.
Yeah.
That affects us. And that's hard to change buying patterns of people. And I just heard on the news this morning a major institution and another food chain have merged, and groceries will go down in this particular one, and you can now buy your peanut butter right online.
Right.
Which is good for me.
So
Let's go back to the way it's distributed, because it's very important, Dave. We've got to get the message out.
Yeah.
I know you're hurried. I'll hurry. So the money of that half a point that goes up, half of that money goes directly to the cities of origin. So if they're bought in Brentwood or Franklin, wherever, or the unincorporated area, it goes back to those coffers. The other half goes to him for operation.
Okay.
So the county commission, the budget committee and that, have asked us to go out and say, cities, would you give up something that you don't have for 3 years? In 3 years, you can have it. That'll help pay for your roads and the things you want. Every one of them has said yes. That's an amazing journey I've had. Now, I'm not saying every individual pushed the button for it, but every one of those majorities said that's the way to go.
Right.
And so did the schools. They gave up their portion to help fund these new things. That's, to me, is an approach, because sales tax is generated through people who come to our counties that don't live here.
Right.
They shop.
Do we know what percentage is paid by people that don't live here?
There have been some estimates on numbers. It's somewhere around 25%, 20 to 25%. I think that may be a little high.
That kind of makes up for the BEP formula for all these people driving in here to the restaurants and stores.
Don't let Sam hear that. They need to work on their problems on the hill. But that is one option, the sales tax, and it's strictly up to the voters. If they want to go that route, which I personally feel that's a better route than raising property taxes. I don't see there's an appetite to cut the school budgets.
Right.
And I don't see an appetite for the county commission and the school board saying, let's just put them on. And I want to touch on one other thing. Dr. Looney and I were talking about this the other day. When Page High School is built out and it goes to 3 stories, Ronald Reagan used to have a comment. It was a trickle down. Well, guess what we've got to do on the county side? We've got to go out and buy a truck, what they call a fire truck. It's got a ladder capability to get up to 3 stories. Our trucks out in our community, that's volunteer men and women that the county commission funds for their buildings, their vehicles. But those ladder trucks, you're going to need at least a 100-foot ladder truck to get up for safety reasons to go to Page High School.
Well, if he puts the slide on them, they can just slide down the outside.
I heard him say that.
That'll get the kids out, but it won't put the fire out.
Okay.
So those are things you have to think about through a community that's all in volunteers. Those men and women work at a place like you do, and the bell rings and they rush back to put it out. That's what we have. That's the difference in living in cities and counties.
Right.
But I am so thankful for the cities to the date of how they've stepped up.
Okay, so just make sure I understand the way this all works.
We don't want you to understand all of it.
Well, I'm going to try to anyway. So we raise, the state law says that half of the sales tax goes to the schools, and the other half goes to the cities currently. And so what you're asking the cities to do is give up their portion of it for 3 years.
That's correct.
And to fund school capital projects.
100%.
Okay, and then you've asked the schools to give up the operation of that money going to operations to pay for new schools.
That's correct.
So that would be another 20 million or 25.
That is correct.
And it completes the puzzle of paying for all these new schools, it sounds like. Now, that's all subject to the voters voting to approve the new sales tax.
Correct.
The increase. Do I have it pretty well straight there?
You do.
That's good. I want to leave just a couple of minutes here for questions from the audience. I wanted to leave a little bit more, but this is the most complicated subject I think I've tried to unravel up here in a while, and I wanted to try to understand how these things get paid for and how we're progressing with the plans for the new school. Anybody have any other questions they would like to ask our guest this morning? Come on, everybody's shy. I'm going to have to ask someone to volunteer here myself here in a minute.
Ask them how they would vote.
Yeah, Gary Buchanan, how would you vote on this?
You're going to go through each one of them, Dave?
Yeah.
You'll clean
Brian,
this
you're
room.
next.
You'll clean this room out here in a minute.
I'm Gary Buchanan. I would vote 150% for this because y'all have clarified for the viewing audience in this crowd today the issue we're involved in. And of course, Roger, I want to compliment you and I want to compliment Dr. Looney and the staff and the teachers in the Williamson County school system. And also, there's a question, I would think I know the answer to this, but Franklin Special School District has not been mentioned. And would y'all comment, is there anything in part of the sales tax increase that would benefit the Franklin school system? Thank you.
So the short answer is, Gary, thank you. We have looked them over. They do share in the sales tax too, and they would get the increase likewise. Those areas that serve within the special school district, then yes, there would be the sales tax. When we lump the total sum of about $20 million in, that's 10 from the sales tax from all the cities and the county. We have some sales tax in the unincorporated area, very few up in Grassland area, down on Henpeck Lane, a few convenience stores out in the unincorporated area. I think we get about $2.5 million worth of sales tax total. But you take somebody like Brentwood, you get about 3.5 in sales tax last year, Kurt. Is that about right? 2.5, 3 million? Yeah. So, I mean, every county beats, every city within Williamson County almost beats the county except for maybe Thompson Station, but Franklin Special gets theirs too, yes.
They get about 9% of our share.
Yeah.
9%.
Yes, sir.
We've got somebody that's shy that has texted me a question, but Scott Speedy wants to know what is the current debt on existing schools and what's the mortgage payment on it, Dad?
So we have, I don't have that book with me and Nina's out, but I'm going to try to recall from this. Our total debt is around $500 million. Part of that is other debt other than schools, that we have. Some of that is Williamson Medical Center that shows on there that they pay their bills. They pay the payment on that, but it's around $500,000, and we use some of those $500 million, excuse me, and we use the adequate school facility tax, the privilege tax. We use a combination of fees and taxes to pay our debt load, and I don't have that right off the top of my head. But I will say to Scott, who's running, and along with the other people that always like to get into the races and ask those kind of questions when they're running, that we are a AAA bonded rated county, just like Brentwood is and just like Franklin is. And we have got adequate sources, and I am so thankful for the men and women that balance the books, and Dr. Looney and School Board and County Commission for being mindful of that.
Right.
But we are a growing county. We need courtroom space. We need new law enforcement. If we're going to continue to grow the way we're going to grow, and we are going to grow, we've got to pay the bills and we've got to provide these services.
Well, I've made the statement a time or two, trying to grow these school systems in this county without debts, like asking a young couple to wait until they can pay cash for their house to buy a house and not have a mortgage, because when you've got growth, you're going to have funding issues. So.
Can I touch on one other thing, because you mentioned something that there's a new buzzword in the community called corporate welfare. Mm-hmm. And I know, I see them giving you the 5-minute times. These businesses that are moving to our community, I think to date we've done about 11 payment in lieu of tax programs, or TIFs, we call them. Companies like Nissan. Is there a value you can put on Nissan and Tractor Supply and these companies as they grow these jobs and bring these issues to the forefront that we've got? This community and this county commission body, through the efforts of the cities, has never once given away a penny of tax dollars that go to the schools.
Yep.
So our tax rate is $2.15, and the school portion of that is $1.24 or something. So we never ever touch the school tax dollar. And so you're going to have, you're going to have all of these people that'll start saying, well, you're giving away school tax dollars. We don't do that. Cities don't do that. We talk and negotiate to get these with whatever's left beyond our schools. And so there's going to be a movement, and it's already started, how corporate welfare is paying for businesses come to town. In most every case we've ever looked at, it's been a raw piece of land that we're getting very few tax dollars on to put a building on. To me, that makes good sense. Others may disagree with me.
Matt Largen, come up just a quick minute. I should have had you up here talking about how the schools make your job easier, but you've got a question, I understand, and
sure.
Let's cover that right quick.
Yeah, and let me just say too, I mean, people try to separate the business community and the community. They're one and the same. If not for the companies that moved here, our residents wouldn't have a place to work. So I get a little frustrated when people try to separate those two. They're really one and the same. They both depend on each other.
Right.
My question is actually pretty simple. Rogers and Mike, first of all, thanks for your leadership on this. Secondly, what's the timeline for the actual vote and the logistics, and how would this actually work for the vote for the sales tax?
60 seconds.
60 seconds. The short of it is we wanted all the cities to be on board. We'll present that to the county commission. To date, I still have 2 cities out, but they probably won't make it before the filing deadline of the September county commission. So we're looking at this in October.
Okay.
In October, Chad's group, to the election commission, will have to scurry around, but his body says from the time the county commission votes for it and I sign it, we have 75 days to 90 days to get this on the ballot. So if we do it in October, you've got a minimum of 75 days, no more than 90 days to get it onto the ballot. There's no way we can capture the fall sales tax, and then you have to allow people the opportunity to adjust that. It's probably 60 or 90 days before people can go in and collect and correct all their machinery to get that properly taken, if it passes.
Right. So January for a vote, maybe?
75 to 90 days after the county commission meeting, second week in
Got
October.
it.
You're not going
All
to
right.
get me down because I don't have a calendar before me.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
And we need somebody like Matt in the chamber to help us market this and educate, not market for it or against it, but to educate the people what we're attempting to do.
Well, hopefully we accomplished a little of that this morning. I know I understand a lot more about it than I did before. And I just wanted to understand where all the money's coming from and how it's going, and it all adds up. The math works. And we appreciate your leadership, appreciate you being here this morning, Mr. Mayor, Dr. Looney, and I hope that this cleared up a lot of questions.
You've got 1 minute. I see the finger up. And how's the growth been for this year since we've been open a week?
I checked yesterday. We're over 39,000 students, and it's not even September yet.
And that's compared to what, last year?
We've grown by about 1,100 students so far, and as you know, I think we're doing 10 a day basically. So.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. It's been a great discussion. Appreciate your participation, and we appreciate Vanderbilt for helping make this happen, and all the staff at the chamber. Lots of people behind the scenes making this happen. Our next program is September 29th. Our guest is going to be Congressman Marsha Blackburn. We're looking forward to have no idea what's going to be going on in Washington by then, but we'll have her help us understand all the behind the scenes stuff up there. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you next month.